Story 1. I'm currently on vacation at a pretty fancy hotel, and you know how these places go, everything's top-notch, from the food to the service. But today, two things happened that seriously made me question humanity. I know people can be inconsiderate, but the level of entitlement I witnessed was on another level. So, let me set the scene. It's breakfast time, and I'm seated at this cozy little table near the buffet. I'm just minding my own business, enjoying a croissant and some coffee, when I notice this family at a nearby table. There's a couple, their kid, and what looks like the grandmother. Now, I wouldn't have paid them much attention, except they were literally stacking food on their table like it was going out of style. And when I say stacking, I mean they had an entire mini buffet going on at their table: ham, cheese, croissants, sausages, fruit, you name it. At first, I thought, okay, maybe they're just really hungry. But then I realized they weren't even touching most of it. Like, they had piled their plates so high, but half of the food was just sitting there, untouched. Meanwhile, people were going up to the buffet and finding empty trays where the food used to be. I overheard one guy ask a staff member if they'd be refilling the ham, and the poor staff member just looked overwhelmed, probably because this family had taken half the buffet with them. I couldn't stop staring at the mountain of food on their table, especially since they were barely eating any of it. The kid was picking at a croissant, the grandma was slowly nibbling on a piece of cheese, and the couple was just chatting away, not even looking at the food they had hoarded. I was honestly getting irritated just watching them. Like, who does that? There's no way they were going to finish all that food, and I knew it was all going to end up in the trash. Sure enough, when they finally got up to leave, their table was still covered in plates of untouched food. I felt this deep sense of disgust just wash over me. The waste was just overwhelming. I kept thinking about how many people out there can barely afford to eat. And here were these people just casually throwing away more food than some people see in a week. It wasn't just wasteful, it was disrespectful to everyone else who might have wanted a croissant or some ham that morning. But that wasn't even the worst part of my morning. Oh no, it got worse. After breakfast, I decided to grab a drink from the beverage station. This hotel has this super fancy setup where they've got these jars built into the machine for juices and water, and it automatically refills the jars when you put them back. It's a pretty slick system, and usually, people just fill their glasses and pop the jar back into the machine so it can refill. So, I'm standing there, filling my glass with orange juice, when this woman walks up. She doesn't just fill a glass, though. No, she takes the entire jar of water out of the machine. I figured maybe she's got a big group at her table and needs to fill up several glasses. Fair enough, right? I go back to my table, sip my juice, and relax. A few minutes go by, and I notice the water jar is still missing. People are coming up to the machine, looking confused because there's no water. I start looking around, and I spot the woman who took the jar. But here's the kicker, she's not even in the restaurant anymore. She's walking out, heading for the elevators, with the jar in hand. I couldn't believe it. I'm sitting there thinking, did she just steal the jar? Who even thinks of doing that? It's one thing to take an extra pastry or something, but to just take the entire jar of water back to your room. It's beyond rude. I got up and found a staff member, and when I told her what happened, she just looked at me like she couldn't process what I was saying. She went out of the restaurant with the jar. Oh, really? The staff member kept repeating, like she was trying to convince herself this was actually happening. She eventually rushed off to the kitchen, probably to figure out how to get another jar of water for the machine. As I sat back down, I couldn't help but wonder what the heck is wrong with some people. How do they just not care about anyone else? It's like they're in their own little bubble where the rules don't apply to them. I kept thinking about how I was raised to respect others, not to waste food, and to think about how my actions affect the people around me. But clearly, not everyone got that memo. This whole experience just left a bad taste in my mouth. Not because of the food, which, by the way, was amazing, but because of how casually some people can be so disrespectful. It's like they don't even consider that their actions have consequences, not just for themselves, but for everyone around them. And what's worse is that they probably don't even realize they're doing anything wrong. I'm trying not to let it ruin my vacation. But honestly, it's hard not to feel a little disillusioned when you see stuff like this. I keep thinking about the staff who have to clean up after that family, throwing away all that wasted food, and the people who wanted a glass of water but couldn't get one because someone decided they needed the entire jar for themselves. I guess I'll just try to focus on the positives of this trip and let go of the frustration. But man, people really do suck sometimes. Story 2. This isn't my story. It was from a close friend of a then close friend. I'm not sure how I never thought about sharing it, as it is one of the best malicious compliance stories I've ever heard. There's quite a bit of background here, mostly to explain old technology. This guy, we'll call him G, was pretty wealthy. He had a nepotism-driven job where he worked in a factory fixing the machinery, which almost literally never broke. Someone always had to be on duty to be ready for repairs, so he got all kinds of overtime and was being paid almost $75 per hour in the early 2000s. To give you an idea of the kind of money he was making and how little he cared, he spent most of his days sitting around watching movies on a personal laptop that he had spent over $2,000 on and just left at his desk. If he had a call to the floor, it would take him no more than an hour, and that would happen maybe 3 times in a week. Holidays paid at 2.5 times the normal rate, and he worked every one of them. G was a bit of a tech enthusiast, and he got an Integrated Services Digital Network ISDN account as soon as it became available. For those who are too young or weren't tech-savvy at the time, Integrated Services Digital Network was basically two 56.6 kilobits per second modems combined. This was back when 56.6 kilobits per second was as good as it got for residential use, and you could still pay for even slower speeds. So, it was fast as anything for its day. Back in the days of dial-up, the dark ages, some services would charge by the minute of usage in addition to your monthly bill, and that's how this one worked. Also, because dial-up was literal and used existing infrastructure, you could take your modem with you and use it elsewhere by logging into your account from a new location and dialing the closest number to you. This was also back in the day of long-distance charges. Now, for the actual story. G had just gotten his Integrated Services Digital Network modem, and after a day or so, he took it to his brother's house one town over to show him how fast it was. After they played around on the internet for a bit, G had to go to work, where he would be doing some long shifts for the next couple of days. His brother asked to borrow the modem, which G said was fine. Somehow, his brother ended up signing into a long-distance number and then forgot to disconnect the connection. And then G got his first month's bill. It was over $14,000. He immediately called the service provider, explained the situation, and they basically told him, "You signed a contract, tough luck. We want our money." He relented and set up a payment plan. He was also required to keep the contract going until the bill was fully paid. Now, if you've never heard of Integrated Services Digital Network, even if you're over 30 years old, I don't blame you. This was a very short-lived technology and was replaced by Digital Subscriber Line DSL just a couple of years later. But unlike Integrated Services Digital Network, Digital Subscriber Line required new infrastructure, and for some reason that I don't fully understand, but I guess is probably related to how some important switch on the service provider's network was set up, the two services could not coexist in the same small region. Regions the size of a neighborhood, for example. G lived in a pretty nice neighborhood, not mansions, but upper middle class. It was the best neighborhood our small town had to offer, in fact, and people just wanted Digital Subscriber Line. It was the first time the internet was getting close to being recognizable as it is today, because it was so much faster than what was previously available. The folks in this neighborhood wanted those speeds and did not like being told that they couldn't have them. So, the service provider called G and explained the situation, offering to waive the remaining amount of the bill. G told them the whole bill was nonsense and asked if they would refund what he had already paid, but they just told him to go fly a kite. Cue malicious compliance. G told them that he had a contract and pointed out that they were obligated to fulfill their end of the contract, and he would be paying his bill in full. Then he hung up. he kept paying. The service provider kept getting calls from more customers wanting digital subscriber line, and folks who had previously called were calling back, growing more and more irate. G received another call, then another, until the service provider decided to just tell people exactly who was responsible for their neighborhood's lack of digital subscriber line service. His neighbors let loose on him, but did G care? Not at all. He just kept paying his bill. This went on for more than a year. Eventually, the service provider decided to get rid of Integrated Services Digital Network completely, as it was a legitimately outdated technology, and they did forgive the remainder of G's bill since they weren't fulfilling their end of the contract, but the whole thing was just wonderful. Story 3. I first got to college my freshman year and met the dorm leader at most schools. Like most colleges, the dorm leader was the upperclassman that lived in the dorms and monitored the freshman halls. My dorm leader's name was Julio, fake name BTW, and at first, he seemed like a nice dude that minded his own business. He talked about how he would stay out of everyone's business if we would stay out of his. Also, he tried to be the cool dorm leader and always mentioned to me about how he drank tons of alcohol his freshman year in the dorms. He gave off the impression he really didn't care if we ever drank in our dorm rooms, but to just keep it on the low if we did. I really didn't drink much at all, but I appreciated the fact he seemed pretty normal and didn't try to rat on kids. During the last week of October of my freshman year of college, I had one of the hardest weeks of my academic career. I was a biochemistry major taking some pretty tough classes and had 3 exams that week. At the end of the week, a friend I had recently made down the hall invited me to his dorm room to watch an upcoming NBA game. As we were watching the game, he had a bottle of vodka and gave some to the guys in the dorm. Being a naive and stupid freshman kid just trying to make some friends, I took 1 shot of vodka and continued to watch the game. As we're watching the game, one of the guys in the dorm spills a bottle of soda and rushes to the bathroom to grab some paper towels. As he walked out of the dorm room, Julio walked by and noticed the bottle of vodka. He laughed and said something of the sort of, "I remember when I was a freshman, haha, just try and keep it down." We thanked him and told him to have a good night. It seemed like a normal conversation and nothing out of the ordinary. 30 minutes later, we heard a knock on the door and 2 policemen showed up with breathalyzers. They told us they had received a complaint from Julio about underage drinking and a party being thrown in the dorm room. Remember, it was 3 guys watching a Lakers game on a Thursday night at 8 p.m. I ended up getting a minor in consumption charge for blowing a .02. Had to do 20 hours community service, a reflection journal, and appear to the Judicial Affairs Center at my college about my supposed drinking problem. I'm not blaming the officer for giving me a ticket, but I was pretty upset that Julio, who always talked about getting drunk during his freshman year in the dorm, called the police right after he essentially gave us the okay for the night. A few weeks later, I saw Julio and straight up asked him why he decided to rat me out. Specifically, I asked why he didn't just tell me to head back to my dorm if he had a problem with the alcohol instead of calling the police right after our conversation. He responds word for word with, "You made a decision and had to suffer the consequences of that decision." After that incident, I never really talked to him, but he always tried to be buddy-buddy when he saw me in the hallway. Anyway, I eventually left the dorms and moved off campus for my sophomore year. I had decided to rush a fraternity my freshman year and ended up meeting some really nice guys. I have never been the fraternity type, but I went to a smaller college where fraternities are a lot different than most places. During the 2nd semester of my sophomore year, my fraternity was taking a new pledge class. One day I received a text from Julio saying, "One of the guys pledging your fraternity has been caught dealing alcohol to another freshman in the dorms. I thought I would let you know." Turns out Julio was the dorm leader for a freshman pledging my fraternity and ratted him out to Judicial Affairs as well. Thinking the term dealing alcohol was the lamest funniest thing I have ever heard, I sent that to our fraternity GroupMe and everyone laughed about it. About a week later, that kid pledging our fraternity came up to me asking about the message I received from Julio. Essentially, a pretty similar thing happened to him like what happened to me. Giulio found out he had given another kid in the dorm a bottle of wine and reported it to the police. This kid ended up getting a minor in possession and had to speak with Judicial Affairs. This is where the story gets hilarious. In his meeting with Judicial Affairs, the kid pledging our fraternity told them that his dorm leader Giulio was now a senior at this point had texted me about the charges pending against him. Apparently, it's a huge violation to discuss pending charges against a freshman in your dorm to a third party. The Judicial Affairs guy told him that if he could prove Giulio was discussing this charge with a third party aka me, he would receive severe sanctions. Basically, if I sent that text to the Judicial Affairs people, Giulio would be in big trouble, so ended up sending them that text that night. After that, I didn't hear anything about what happened to Giulio and had honestly forgotten about it. However, nearing the end of the school year in my sophomore year, I saw Giulio at the dining hall and came up to speak to me. He tells me a story about how he knows I was the one who ratted him to Judicial Affairs, how he ended up getting fired from his dorm leader position, lost the scholarship money his dorm leader job provided him, and overall how bad his life has been since he got fired. After going through his entire sob story, he asked me, "Why did you do that? This could have been handled completely differently. I didn't have to get fired and I could have kept my scholarship money." I looked him dead in the eye for what seemed like 30 seconds and said, "Giulio, you made a decision and had to suffer the consequences of that decision." Story 4. It was a quiet day at the military camp. I, Private Smith, was standing at the gate with my partner, Private Johnson, our rifles at the ready. We were both starting to get a little bored. It had been a long shift, and not much had happened. But that all changed when a car approached the gate at high speed. Private Johnson and I exchanged a glance. We both knew that this wasn't going to be a routine visit. The car came to a halt in front of the gate and a woman stepped out. She was angry, her face contorted with rage. "I demand to see the commander," she spat out. Private Johnson and I tried to calm her down, explaining that she couldn't just barge into the camp like that. We asked her to leave her car and follow us to the visitors center, but she wasn't having any of it. She revved up her engine and tried to force her way through the gate. Private Johnson and I had to act fast. We grabbed her by the arm and pulled her out of the car. She struggled and shouted, demanding to see the commander. "Ma'am, please calm down," I said. "We can't just let you barge into the camp and cause a scene. Let's go to the visitor center and call the commander to come and speak with you." She grudgingly followed us to the visitors center, where we called the commander to come and speak with her. When he arrived, she launched into a tirade, telling him all about the military individual who had refused to let her cut in line at the store. The commander listened patiently before finally speaking. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but the military has more important things to worry about than to reprimand someone that didn't allow you to cut in line at a store. I must ask you to leave the camp immediately." Karen's face turned red with anger at the commander's words. "How dare you talk to me like that?" she shouted. "I'm entitled to have my complaint heard." The commander remained calm, but firm. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but your behavior is unacceptable. I must ask you to leave the camp immediately." But Karen wasn't about to give up. She lunged at the colonel, trying to slap him. Private Johnson and I quickly moved in to intervene, tackling Karen to the ground and handcuffing her. She struggled and shouted, but we were able to subdue her. "Take her away," the commander said grimly. "She's not welcome here." Private Johnson and I escorted Karen off the camp, shaking our heads at the bizarre turn of events. "Well, that was a wild ride," Private Johnson said to me. "Tell me about it," I replied. "I'm just glad it's over." After being taken down and handcuffed by Private Johnson and me, Karen was arrested and faced criminal charges for attempting to break into the military camp and attempting to attack the commander. The judge who presided over her case was unsympathetic to Karen's entitled attitude and her belief that the world owed her something. He sentenced her to 6 months in prison for her actions. Karen was shocked and outraged by the sentence. She had never been in trouble with the law before and couldn't believe that she was being punished for trying to assert her rights. But the judge was firm. He told Karen that her behavior was unacceptable and that she needed to learn to respect the rules and boundaries of society. Karen spent 6 long months in prison, reflecting on her actions and the consequences of her entitlement. Story 5. A few months ago, my partner, let's call him Jake, and I decided to take a much-needed vacation. We booked a stay at a beautiful resort in Mexico, the kind with pristine beaches, crystal-clear pools, and endless margaritas. It was supposed to be the perfect getaway to unwind, recharge, and just forget about the stress of our day-to-day lives. Now, I've always been a pretty easygoing person. I don't let little things get to me, and I'm usually the one telling Jake to relax when something annoying happens. But there was this one thing that happened on this trip that I just can't seem to shake. It's been months, and it still makes my blood boil when I think about it. So, every day at this resort, Jake and I would head down to the pool area to chill out. The poolside lounges were prime real estate, and we quickly noticed that they were always occupied. No big deal, right? People were just enjoying their time, and we figured we'd find a spot eventually. We didn't let it bother us too much. We were on vacation, after all, and there was plenty to do besides lounging by the pool. But after a few days, we started noticing something odd. There were these 4 lounge chairs that always seemed to be empty, except for the towels draped over them. At first, we thought maybe the people who claimed them were just taking a quick dip in the pool or grabbing a drink from the bar. But the towels stayed there, untouched, for hours. One morning, we decided to put our theory to the test. We got up early, grabbed a quick breakfast, and then parked ourselves on a nearby bench to watch these mysterious lounges. We sat there, sipping our coffees and waiting to see if anyone would show up. Hours passed, and no one came. The towels just sat there, mocking us. After what felt like forever, we decided that whoever had claimed those chairs had probably gone into town for the day. Maybe they thought they could just reserve the chairs for when they got back. But we figured it wasn't fair for those lounges to sit empty while everyone else was struggling to find a spot. So, we made a decision. We moved the towels and settled in. It felt a little rebellious, but honestly, I didn't care. We were on vacation, and I wasn't about to let someone else's entitlement ruin our good time. Jake was a bit more cautious, but even he agreed it was ridiculous for those chairs to just sit there unused all day. For the first time in days, we actually relaxed. I stretched out on the lounge, letting the sun warm my skin, and felt the tension melt away. It was bliss. Jake even joked that we should have done this on day 1. We had a good couple of hours of peace, just lounging by the pool and soaking up the sun. But of course, it couldn't last. Out of nowhere, this woman storms over, and I mean storms. She had this look on her face like we'd just keyed her car or something. She was livid. Without even a hello, she starts in on us, yelling about how those were her chairs and that she'd gotten up at 5 a.m. to claim them. I was stunned, honestly. It was 3 p.m. at this point. Who reserves chairs at 5 in the morning and then doesn't use them all day? I tried to explain, calmly, that we'd been watching those chairs for hours and no one had used them. I even pointed out that the resort had a no-claim policy, meaning you couldn't just throw a towel on a chair and expect it to be yours for the whole day. But she wasn't having any of it. She was too busy calling me every name under the sun, including a rude B*********H. It was one of those moments where you just can't believe someone is actually acting like this. While I was still trying to process her over-the-top reaction, she started dragging 2 of the lounges away, including the one Jake had been using. He was in the bathroom at the time, so I couldn't even warn him before he came back to find his chair missing. The woman kept yelling and cursing, making a huge scene. I could feel people around the pool starting to stare, but I just didn't have it in me to fight with her. We were on vacation, and I didn't want to ruin what was supposed to be a relaxing day. What really got me, though, was that she didn't even use all the chairs. She dragged them away just to prove a point, I guess, but then she and her friend only used 2 of them. The other 2 sat there, empty, just like before. One of them even became her storage lounge, where she tossed her bag and some towels. Meanwhile, Jake and I were left sharing one chair, which, let me tell you, was not exactly comfortable. We ended up leaving not long after that. It just wasn't worth sticking around and letting her bad energy ruin the day even more. As we were gathering our things, I heard her say, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Thank God the Fing BH is leaving." I don't know why, but that hurt more than anything else she'd said. Maybe it was because I knew I hadn't done anything wrong, but she still managed to make me feel like I had. It's been months since that trip, and I still think about that day. I keep wondering if I broke some unspoken rule of resort etiquette, or if I was right to take those chairs after all that time. But the more I think about it, the more I realize that it wasn't about the chairs. It was about her feeling entitled to something just because she got up early and threw a towel down. And that's what really gets to me. Story 6. This happened yesterday. This is a repost from entitled parents. I'm getting a restraining order on the family, I'm doing a little better, and I know that they were correct in that it was a PTSD episode. Run the crap show. This happened like 9 hours ago. My English is not the best, so I apologize. I don't know if PTSD episode is the right wording for it because I don't know what the F I was going through because I had one before, and I didn't feel like that, but everyone else said it was someone can correct me, that'll be okay. This is the shortest I can make. My boss K and my uncle-in-law and I were early shopping for Thanksgiving. When we were done, my boss forgot something and went back to get it, and I sat down on the bench to play Stardew. As I was trying to fish for a lava eel, 2 people sat down on each side of me. I looked up and noticed it was my dad, and my stepmom in front of me was my brother. My heart fell out of my ass. If you haven't read the stories about my twin sister, you know that my sister is my father's and stepmother's golden child, and my father's other children hated my sister so badly that they took their hatred for her out on me. I became scared. I tried to get up, but both my sperm donor and his crack whore grabbed me and put me back down. They proceeded to dig their nails into my skin and whisper really screwed up crap into my ear. They used to do that to me as a child as a torture method when we were in public. They'd tell me how I was useless, that I was ungrateful, and that I would be giving my sister my money. And I'm disgusting act. I'm the most mentally fragile out of my father's children, and with my autism, you could screwed me up easily. As they dug their nails to my skin until I bleed, my brain shouted at me, did you forget you're pregnant? Protect your crap. So I bit my stepmother and smacked my dad with my Stylo 5. I tried to book it, but I didn't get too far because my brother grabbed me by my wrist. The way he grabbed me immediately put me into a PTSD episode. I started apologizing and I said that I was sorry. Then I started begging for help, screaming for my boss to save me because he's my safety shield. The employees tried to intervene, but my dad told them that they caught me stealing. Then my dad slapped me in the face for breaking the law. Deeper into the PTSD episode I go. So many bad memories came flooding back, and as my brother reached for my face, that I thought he was trying to hurt me again. My good brother, the one I like, gave me a pocket knife to carry around with me. I recently found it again, and I've jammed that mother tucker right in the hole of a brother's hand. I don't remember what happened afterwards because I crawled up into a ball and lost my crap. My boss helped me out of what the hell I was going through. He the only man who can touch me when I'm losing my mind. After I came to, I told them what happened and I feared for my life. Well, long story short, my family got arrested. I have a sprained wrist and I have scars on my body from where they dug their nails into my skin. But the one thing that pissed me off the most out of all this bullcrap, my twin sister called me. Calling me out of my name because I got daddy arrested. I'm not okay. I keep flinching every time fiancé try to reach for me, and I'm heartbroken, and my witch of a sister is worried about damn father and my stepmom and not me. I was the one who was assaulted. I'm the victim here. What the hell? The funniest part about it, she wants me to pay their bail. I'm going to talk to my therapist in the morning. This is definitely a setback, and I am constantly in fight or flight mode. My mother wants to cut a witch. I think it's hilarious when the French lady gets so angry. My true family is by my side, and I'm going to be okay eventually, I just don't know when. I'm not in the right mindset, so I don't know how to end this, I'm sorry. Update. Hello, this is an update to this /rent because I can't find my journals, and I'm currently using Reddit to share my stress. My English is not the best, so I'm sorry. You have a warning, this going to be screwed up. My life, this is the short version of it. My twin and I were born in France. We lived with our mother, and our oldest are 2 siblings. I thought my twin sister hated me since the day that I can remember, but the more I think about it, the more I realize it wasn't the case. We were inseparable at first. She loved me. I think it started when we spent the first couple months in Egypt with my dad and his family. My father was a wealthy man. I don't know what he did, but he made a lot of money for it. I don't know when it started, but one day my lovely father started treat me like trash, while his wife and he treated my twin sister like royalty. I still don't know what's the difference between my sister and I, but they loved her more than me, and eventually my twin sister started hating me too. My twin sister and I will spend 5 months of the year. Oh my God, those months was the worst months of my life. They treated me so badly. They would give me garbage and my twin sister got diamonds. Then my family neglect, emotional and verbal abuse turned into physical abuse. My dad and stepmom started hitting me. They started torturing me for things I didn't do. I have a fear of hot stoves, the dark, and talking in from the other people because of them. It wasn't just them. My dad, other children, let's call them Witch, Dick and Pablo, started torturing me as well. I got along with Pablo because he always felt our father's wrath. But Witch and Dick started hitting me as well. They hated my twin sister so much, but they couldn't do anything about it because the guy would beat the crap out of them. So they turned their hatred towards me. They legit torture me by trying to hang with an power cord, trying to drown me, force me to eat bugs, and killing my cat in front of me. Rip Aimer. You dislike everyone, but you disliked me the least. Then they started torturing me in other ways. The physically/psychological abuse turned into sexual. I had a really screwed up memories of Witch and Dick helping me down and taking turns, and I have a memory of my stepmom walking in, saw what children was doing to me, turned around, and walked away. Then she beat the crap out of me and threatened not to tell. My twin sister started sexually assaulting as was, but thankfully it didn't last. I remember the day I started fighting back. I think I was about 8 when my stepmother was beating Pablo for wearing her lipstick. Then something just snapped. I grabbed a virus and threw it at her back. Then I started wailing on her. I got my ass beat on my dad for that, but it was worth it. Since that day I started fighting back. But only if someone to push me to my limit, or when someone was hurting someone I loved. I don't fight back anymore. I'm trying to get back in that mindset, but I will stab Witch to protect my family. Eventually my family moved to America, and my father and his family followed. My dad didn't help when my family was starving. He only gave food to my twin sister. He didn't care my family beings broke. He only gave my twin sister money. He didn't care that I got sick and almost died. He only paid attention to my twin sister. So why should I bring this up? It's over. My father, stepmother, and brother was charged with battery, assault on a pregnant disabled woman, and I sue them for most emotional damage. They also got charged with some other that ISIS. Not important for the story. My family got 10 to 25 years in prison. Knowing my dad, he won't make it past a year because he's a pussy and he's currently dying. They thought they were win because I was about to back down. I wasn't even going to press charges on them because that's how broken I am. But they don't know something. The more and more I recognized how these morons did to me was wrong, the more and more I want to watch them burn. If anyone is curious about my father's other children, Pablo is now Papaloa, and she lives with her now wife and her beautiful kids, and Witch is on her 10th baby daddy, and her children hate her more than I do. My twin sister is blaming me because I took with her family. Her husband is also getting a divorce, and I'm about to go take a nap.